I found her shivering from the cold and gave her my coat. I didn't know she was a princess. The wind howled through the trees like a living thing, carrying with it the scent of snow and the faint, lingering smell of something ancient. The forest seemed endless, a frozen ocean of white that stretched as far as the eye could see. Each tree stood tall and silent, their branches heavy with ice, glinting in the pale moonlight. Shadows danced across the ground, stretching long and thin, giving life to the stillness of the night. Elias wrapped his cloak tighter around his shoulders, the fabric offering little comfort against the bitter cold. He had traveled this forest countless times, yet the night seemed different, quieter, more solemn, as if the trees themselves were holding their breath. His boots crunched in the fresh snow, leaving a trail that would soon vanish, swallowed by the drifting flakes. It was then that he noticed her. At first, she seemed nothing more than a silhouette hunched beneath the twisted branches of an old oak. Her form was small, fragile, almost lost in the vastness of the forest, and yet there was something about her that made him stop in his tracks. She was shivering violently, her hands pressed against her chest as though she could shield herself from the cold with sheer willpower. "Are you all right?" Elias called softly, his voice barely disturbing the stillness around them. The figure looked up slowly, and he saw her face, pale as the snow, with eyes that seemed too large, too bright for someone so small. They held a depth of fear and sorrow that made his chest tighten. For a moment, neither of them moved. The wind swept between them, carrying his words away, leaving only the quiet whisper of falling snow. He approached cautiously, yet the warmth of his heart urged him forward. "Here," he said, shrugging off his own cloak. "Take this, it will help against the cold." The woman hesitated, as if weighing whether to accept help from a stranger. Then, with a trembling hand, she reached for the cloak. When it draped over her shoulders, he saw a flicker of relief in her eyes, quickly replaced by something else. Wariness, curiosity, and a quiet, commanding dignity that made him pause. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice soft and melodic, yet carrying an authority that did not belong to someone so small. Elias could not place it. There was something familiar about her, and yet entirely foreign. Her eyes, the slightest curve of her lips, the way she held herself, they all spoke of a life far beyond the frozen woods. Yet she was here, shivering under a tree, alone. "You shouldn't be out here at this hour," he said gently, trying to hide the tremor in his own voice. "The forest, it's not safe." Her gaze drifted to the darkness beyond the trees, and he followed it. For a moment he thought he saw shadows moving in the distance, just beyond the edge of the moonlight. His stomach tightened. Something was coming, something old and dangerous. "They're watching," she said abruptly, turning back to him. Her eyes were wide, fear and urgency mixing in an expression that made his heart skip a beat. "They know I'm here." Elias frowned. "Who knows? What do you mean?" She shook her head, wrapping the cloak tighter around her. "It's better if you don't know yet, but you need to trust me." He wanted to ask more, but the first movement of the shadowy figures froze his words. Shapes emerged from the forest, tall and silent, with eyes that glowed like embers in the night. Their forms were humanoid but twisted, as if carved from the darkness itself. Elia's hand instinctively went to the hilt of his dagger. "Stay behind me," he said, his voice firm though his pulse raced. The woman stepped closer, almost as if she wanted to be protected, but also as if she was offering something in return. Elias felt an odd warmth radiating from her, a quiet strength that made him believe she might withstand the cold, or even the danger that approached. The shadows stopped a few paces away, their glowing eyes fixed on her. One of them raised a hand, and the snow beneath it hissed and cracked as though the forest itself protested. "Do you know them?" Elias asked, keeping his voice low. "Yes," she admitted. Her voice trembled, but only slightly. "They are servants of the curse, bound to find me wherever I go. If they take me, the kingdom will fall into endless winter." Elias' mind reeled. He had heard stories of cursed lands, of kingdoms lost to frost and shadow, but they had always seemed like tales for children, warnings whispered beside the fire. And yet here it was, staring at him through glowing eyes, real and immediate. "We need to move," she said suddenly, urgency breaking through her composed demeanor. "If we stay, they will overpower us." Elias nodded. He lifted his cloak from around her shoulders, tugging her lightly to signal that they should follow. She moved with surprising grace, despite her shivering, and together they slipped through the trees, deeper into the forest. The snow seemed thicker here, the shadows closer, the wind carrying a low, mournful howl that made him shiver. As they ran, Elias felt the weight of responsibility settle heavily on his shoulders. He did not know who she was, yet the instinct to protect her was undeniable. She was more than just a frightened girl in the woods. There was a presence about her that demanded care, respect, and perhaps something more. Eventually, they came to a small clearing. The snow here had drifted in tall, pristine mounds, and in the center stood an abandoned cabin, its roof sagging under the weight of ice. Smoke curled faintly from the chimney, as if the building had been waiting for them. "This will do," she said, her voice steadier now. "We can rest here for a while, but we must not stay long. They will not give up so easily." Inside, the cabin was cold, but it offered shelter from the relentless wind. Elias lit a small fire, the flames sputtering at first, then gaining strength. The warmth spread slowly, filling the cramped space and easing some of the tension in their muscles. She sat near the fire, pulling the cloak tighter around herself, and he took a moment to study her. Her features were delicate, almost ethereal, yet there was a firmness to her expression that made him think of someone who had faced many hardships. She did not look like a girl lost in the woods. She looked like someone who belonged to another world entirely. "Who are you really?" he asked cautiously. "Why are they after you?" She hesitated. For a long moment she looked into the fire, her reflection flickering in the dancing flames. "I am a princess," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The heir to a kingdom cursed by a sorcerer long ago. If I am captured, my people will suffer and the land will never see warmth again." Elias felt as if the ground had dropped from beneath him. A princess? Here, in the frozen woods, shivering under his coat. It seemed impossible, and yet the fear in her eyes was real, undeniable. I didn't know," he stammered. "I'm not sure what to say." "You don't have to say anything," she replied softly. "Just stay with me tonight, keep me safe." Elias nodded, though he felt the enormity of the task pressing down on him. Outside, the wind continued to howl, and somewhere in the distance, the shadows waited. He did not know if they would survive the night, but he knew he could not abandon her. Hours passed in tense silence, broken only by the occasional crackle of the fire. Elias kept watch, peering through the frost-covered windows, ready for any movement. The princess remained quiet, staring into the flames, lost in thought. There was a sadness about her that weighed heavily on him, a loneliness that seemed to stretch beyond the forest, beyond the kingdom itself. "You have a strong heart," she said suddenly, her voice cutting through the silence. "Stronger than most I have known." Elias felt a warmth in his chest at her words, though he tried not to show it. "I only do what must be done," he replied. "It's the right thing to do." She shook her head, a small, almost imperceptible smile on her lips. "No, it is more than that. There is courage in kindness. There is bravery in protecting someone you barely know." He looked at her then, really looked, and saw not just fear or royalty, but a spark of something wild and untamed. Something that refused to be broken, even by curses and shadowed hunters. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the edge of the forest. Elias leapt to his feet, grabbing his dagger. The shadows were moving closer, their forms darker against the snow. The princess stood as well, her eyes fierce now, a light of determination replacing the fear. "They found us," she said, her voice steady. "We must leave, now." Elias nodded, grabbing her hand gently. Together they stepped out into the night, leaving the safety of the cabin behind. The snow was deep, cold, biting through their clothing, but they ran with purpose. Each step brought them closer to danger, and closer to a bond neither of them fully understood yet. As they disappeared into the forest, the wind howled louder, carrying their names like a warning to the shadows. The chase had begun, and nothing would be the same again. The forest seemed darker as Elias and the princess ran through the snow-laden paths. Every crunch of their boots echoed like a drumbeat in the silence of the night. The wind had grown colder, sharper, and it carried the scent of something ancient and bitter. Shadows moved around them, flitting between the trees, but the pair did not pause. Each step forward was a struggle against exhaustion, against the freezing wind, against the creeping fear that the shadows would overtake them before they could reach safety. Elias stole glances at the girl beside him. She was small and delicate, her cloak wrapped tightly around her, but she moved with surprising determination. Her eyes, bright in the pale moonlight, were filled with a mixture of fear and resolve. Despite the danger, she had a presence about her that made him feel both protective and something more he could not yet name. There was a quiet strength that belied her fragile appearance, and it both fascinated and unsettled him. They finally reached a small clearing where the snow had drifted into high mounds, creating a natural shelter. There, a fallen tree lay across the ground, partially hollowed, providing a crude refuge. Elias helped her behind it, catching his breath as the shadows paused at the edge of the clearing, seemingly hesitant to enter the space. The princess sank to her knees, wrapping herself in the cloak, her teeth chattering despite the warmth it offered. Who are they? Elias asked, trying to keep his voice calm even as his pulse raced. They are servants of the curse, she said quietly, her voice trembling. Creatures bound to find me to bring me back to the sorcerer who cursed my family generations ago. Elias froze. A curse, she nodded, her gaze distant, as if the memory of the curse weighed heavily on her. Long ago, a sorcerer grew angry at my family. He vowed that our kingdom would never know warmth again, that frost would spread across the land whenever the heir of my line walked unprotected. I am that heir. Elia's mind spun. Tales of cursed kingdoms and dark magic had always seemed like stories told by firelight, designed to frighten children. But now, staring at the trembling yet resolute girl in front of him, those stories seemed all too real. Her words were heavy with truth, and he could feel the danger in the very air around them. "And you are a princess?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," she admitted, lowering her gaze. "I did not mean for you to know. It is safer if my identity remains a secret. But now, it seems you already know too much." Elias swallowed, unsure of what to say. He had never met a princess before, let alone one who was fleeing through a cursed forest at midnight. And yet, despite the danger, he felt an undeniable need to protect her. "I will help you," he said simply, conviction hardening his words. "No matter who you are." She looked up at him then, her eyes searching his face. There was surprise there and something else, gratitude mixed with a fragile trust. "You don't know what you are promising," she said softly. "These shadows, they are relentless. They will not stop until I am returned to him. If you stay by my side, you will be drawn into darkness you cannot imagine." Elias took her hand, warm against the cold despite the frost creeping over the edges of her fingers. "Then I will face that darkness. I won't leave you." For a moment, silence fell between them, broken only by the occasional sigh of the wind. The shadows at the edge of the clearing stirred, but seemed to hesitate, as if sensing the determination of the pair. Elias helped her to her feet, and together they moved deeper into the forest, seeking a safer place to rest. After what felt like hours, they reached a small abandoned cabin hidden among the trees. Its roof sagged under the weight of snow, and the windows were frosted over. Yet for Elias and the princess, it was a haven. Inside, the cabin was cold, but it offered shelter from the relentless wind. He quickly started a small fire, the flames flickering and dancing across the walls, casting long shadows that seemed alive. The princess sat near the fire, wrapping herself tighter in the cloak. Elias moved closer, careful not to crowd her, and studied her in the firelight. Her features were delicate, almost ethereal, but there was a firmness to her expression that hinted at the hardships she had faced. She did not speak immediately, instead staring into the flames as if searching for answers hidden in the flickering light. Finally, she spoke, her voice soft but steady. "You deserve to know the truth even if it frightens you. I am the heir to a kingdom that has been cursed for generations. The sorcerer's magic binds me, and it will not allow me to walk freely or live without danger. If I am captured, the kingdom will fall into eternal winter." Elias felt a chill run through him, not from the cold, but from the weight of her words. I don't know what to say," he admitted. "I didn't expect this." "You don't have to say anything," she replied. "Just stay with me tonight, keep me safe, that is enough." Elias nodded. He understood the gravity of the task, yet he did not hesitate. "I will protect you," he said. "I won't let them take you." The fire crackled, filling the small cabin with warmth, but outside, the shadows waited. Elias could feel the weight of their presence pressing against the walls, a silent reminder that danger was never far behind. The princess seemed to sense it too, her eyes flicking toward the window, her fingers tightening around the edges of the cloak. "Why me?" Elias asked after a moment, curiosity and concern mingling in his voice. "Why would a sorcerer curse your family, and why is it only you who suffers?" The princess took a deep breath, her gaze returning to the fire. "Because I am the last of the line," she said quietly. "The curse was placed on my family generations ago, but it grows stronger with each heir. I carry the weight of all who came before me. And now, the sorcerer's magic reaches me, even across the lands, even here in this forest. I am never truly safe. Elias felt a pang of sorrow for her. To bear such a burden at such a young age, to walk alone under the constant threat of death and magic, it was almost too much to imagine. Yet, despite the fear, she remained composed, her dignity intact, her spirit unbroken. "You are stronger than you know," he said softly. "I see it in you. Even now you fight, even when the shadows are close." She looked at him then, her eyes shining with an emotion he could not name. There was gratitude, yes, but also something deeper, trust, fragile and tentative like ice forming on a river. "Perhaps," she said, "but strength is not enough. I need allies. I need someone who will not falter, someone who will stay by my side, even when the darkness seems too great to face." Elias squeezed her hand gently. "Then I will be that someone." Hours passed in uneasy silence, punctuated by the occasional crack of the fire. Outside, the wind continued to howl, and every so often the shadows at the edge of the forest stirred, but none dared enter the cabin. Elias remained vigilant, his eyes scanning every movement, his dagger always at the ready. The princess rested near the fire, her eyes half closed, yet alert, as if listening to some distant sound only she could hear. "Do you ever wonder what it would be like," Elias asked quietly, "to live without fear? To walk in sunlight without thinking the shadows are hunting you?" The princess smiled faintly, a melancholy curve of her lips. "I have dreamed of it," she admitted. "But dreams are dangerous. They make the present harder to bear. Yet sometimes, in fleeting moments like this, I feel that perhaps such a life is possible." Elias felt a strange warmth in his chest at her words, a mixture of hope and longing. He did not know what the future held, nor the dangers that awaited them, but in that moment he felt a bond forming, one forged in fear, trust, and the shared warmth of a small fire in a frozen world. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the forest outside, making both of them jump. Elias leapt to his feet, dagger in hand, his heart racing. The shadows had moved closer, their glowing eyes cutting through the darkness. The princess rose as well, her gaze sharp, her hands trembling slightly, not with fear but with determination. "They found us," she said, her voice steady despite the tension. "We must leave now before they surround us." Elias nodded, taking her hand. Together they stepped out into the snow, leaving the warmth of the cabin behind. The night air was icy, biting at their faces, but they ran with purpose, their steps leaving fresh tracks in the pristine snow. Each step was a fight against exhaustion, against the cold, and against the fear of the unknown that pressed in from every side. As they moved through the forest, Elias realized something profound. He did not fully understand the magic, the curse, or the shadows that pursued them. Yet he knew one thing with absolute certainty: he would not abandon her. Not now, not ever. The princess glanced at him, her eyes reflecting the pale light of the moon. "Elias," she whispered, "thank you for staying. I do not know what I would have done if you had not been here." He looked back at her, the wind whipping snow across their faces. "You do not need to thank me," he said. "We face this together." For a moment they ran in silence, the only sounds the crunch of snow underfoot and the distant howl of the wind. Then, as the forest opened into a wider clearing, the shadows reappeared, moving silently and deliberately toward them. Elias tightened his grip on the princess' hand, his dagger ready, his heart pounding in rhythm with the fear and determination that coursed through him. She whispered, her voice filled with both fear and resolve. "They will not give up. Elias, if they catch me, everything will be lost." Elias met her gaze, his own resolve hardening. "Then we will not let them." Together they ran into the deeper forest, leaving behind the faint glow of the cabin fire. The night was alive with danger, yet also with a promise, a bond forged in the cold, in fear, and in trust. The path ahead was uncertain, but Elias knew one thing for certain. He would follow her anywhere, even into the heart of darkness. The forest seemed endless. Snow stretched like a white sea, and the trees loomed like silent sentinels, their branches heavy with frost. Every step Elias took left a mark in the pristine ground, a reminder of their passage through a land that seemed frozen in time. The shadows that had haunted them before lingered at the edges of the trees, but they did not dare approach as long as Elias and the princess moved with purpose. Elias glanced at the princess, Seraphine, walking beside him. Her small frame was draped in his cloak, her hands wrapped tightly around the edges. Despite the cold, her eyes held a spark of determination. She walked with a grace that belied the fear and exhaustion etched into her features. Her presence was magnetic, drawing him in, making him want to shield her from every danger the forest could produce. "Are we far from the cabin?" Elias asked, his voice low, careful not to disturb the quiet of the night. "Not far," Seraphine replied, her gaze scanning the trees. "But this part of the forest is treacherous. Many paths here lead to dead ends or traps." Elias frowned. "Traps? Magical ones," she said, her voice tight. "The sorcerer who cursed my kingdom left warnings, tests, guardians to protect the path to the forbidden castle. We must be careful." Elias nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility press down on him. He did not fully understand the magic she spoke of, but he knew it was real. He had seen the shadows, felt the chill of danger that followed her like a second shadow. And yet fear did not weaken him, it sharpened his resolve. They walked in silence for a while, each listening to the subtle sounds of the forest. Snow shifted underfoot, ice cracked on hidden branches, and the distant howl of some unseen creature echoed through the trees. The air was heavy, full of secrets, and Elias felt that every step they took drew them closer to something ancient and powerful. Suddenly, the snow beneath them shifted. Elias' instincts screamed at him, and he grabbed Seraphine's arm just as the ground gave way. They stumbled, sliding down a hidden slope until they landed in a small hollow between two trees. Snow covered them, muffling their movements, but Elias' heart raced from the near fall. "Are you hurt?" he asked, brushing snow from her shoulders. "No," she said, her voice steady, though he noticed her fingers tremble. "But we must be more careful. The forest tests those who travel its paths." He helped her to her feet, and together they continued. The hollow they had fallen into led them to a small stream, frozen solid in places, cracked with jagged lines of ice. The moonlight reflected off the frozen surface, creating a path of silver that stretched ahead. Seraphine paused, her eyes narrowing. "This is a dangerous crossing," she said. "The ice looks solid, but it hides cracks, traps set by the curse itself. One wrong step and we could be lost." Elias tested the ice with his foot. It held, though it groaned ominously under his weight. Carefully they crossed, step by step, moving in sync, their breath fogging in the cold air. Each movement was deliberate, each decision a test of trust and awareness. Elias realized how much he depended on her guidance, and perhaps how much she depended on him as well. Hours passed. The forest changed as they went further, trees growing taller, their branches thicker and more tangled. The snow became harder, more compacted, and a strange mist began to rise from the ground. It curled around their legs, chilling them to the bone, and Elias noticed the shadows moving differently now, more deliberate, as if testing their resolve. "Keep close," Seraphine whispered. "The mist, it can confuse travelers." People have walked these paths for hours and emerged lost, or never emerged at all. Elias reached out, taking her hand. "Then we will stick together," he said, "no matter what." Her hand was warm against his, and he felt a surge of strength from the simple contact. It was not just the cold or the shadows that pressed against them, but the weight of the journey ahead, the unknown trials, and the magic that seemed to hum in the air. And yet, with her hand in his, he felt a courage he had never known before. The mist thickened, curling around them like ghostly fingers. Shapes began to form, images that seemed real at first, shadows of people they had known, voices calling their names. Elias felt his heart pound as illusions threatened to mislead them, but Seraphine's voice broke through. "Do not trust what you see," she shouted. "It is not real." Elias gritted his teeth and focused on her, following her movements, listening to her guidance. Step by step, they navigated the mist, trusting in each other. He realized then that the journey was more than physical. It was a test of their will, their courage, and their trust. As dawn approached, they reached a clearing where the mist lifted slightly. In the distance, towering above the forest, they saw it, the forbidden castle. Its walls were black as night, frost-covered spires reaching into the sky. Windows glowed faintly as if lit by an unseen fire. A chill ran down Elias' spine, a mixture of awe and dread. "It is magnificent," he breathed, unable to take his eyes off it. Seraphine's gaze was fixed on the castle, determination hardening her features. "This is where the curse begins and ends," she said. "We must enter carefully." The sorcerer left guardians inside, magical traps designed to prevent anyone from reaching the heart of the castle. "But we cannot turn back now." Elias nodded, gripping her hand. "Then we go forward together." The path to the castle was treacherous. Jagged rocks protruded from the frozen ground, and deep crevices threatened to swallow them. Strange runes were carved into stones along the path, glowing faintly, warning intruders away. Seraphine moved ahead with purpose, stepping lightly, guiding Elias around each obstacle. He noticed that she seemed to draw strength from the castle, as if the closer they got, the more her own power began to awaken. "Do you feel it?" she asked suddenly. "The magic here, it is stronger than anything we have encountered." Elias nodded, though he could barely explain it. A strange hum filled the air, vibrating through his bones, making the hairs on his arms stand on end. He realized that this journey was not just a test of physical endurance, but of heart and courage. They reached the outer gates of the castle, enormous and imposing. The black iron doors were etched with symbols that seemed to shift when looked at directly. The wind howled through the battlements above, carrying a cold that cut deeper than any blade. Elias shivered, but he did not let go of Seraphine's hand. "This is it," she said, her voice steady. "Once we pass through these gates, there is no turning back." Elias felt the weight of her words. He had protected her through the forest, through the shadows, through the mist. But inside the castle, he knew the true danger awaited. The sorcerer's traps, the magic, and the curse itself would test them beyond anything they had faced so far. They stepped forward, pushing the gates open. The hinges groaned, echoing through the empty courtyard. Snow had drifted into the corners, and frost covered every surface. As they entered, Elias felt the temperature drop further, the air itself seeming to resist their passage. Shadows moved along the walls, fleeting and indistinct, yet he knew they were not mere tricks of the eye. "Stay close," Seraphine whispered. "The castle will try to divide us. The magic here feeds on fear, on doubt. We must rely on each other, or we will fail." Elias nodded, gripping her hand tightly. Step by step, they moved deeper into the castle, past corridors lined with frozen statues, each one a victim of the curse, forever trapped in a moment of fear or despair. He felt a chill at the sight, but Seraphine's presence beside him steadied his heart. Suddenly, the floor beneath them shifted. A section of the corridor slid away, revealing a hidden pit filled with swirling frost. Elias grabbed Seraphine's arm just in time, pulling her back to solid ground. She looked at him, eyes wide but not with fear, rather with a spark of admiration. "You saved me," she said softly. "And I always will," he replied, though his own heart raced with a mixture of fear and pride. They pressed onward, the corridors twisting and turning like a labyrinth. Strange whispers echoed through the halls, carrying words they could almost understand. Elias realized the castle itself was alive, testing them, probing their courage and their bond. Each trap they avoided, each shadow they faced, drew them closer together, not just in body but in trust and determination. Hours seemed like days as they navigated the castle, finally reaching a large chamber at its heart. The room was dominated by a massive frozen fountain, its waters solid and glittering like crystal. Runic symbols covered the walls, glowing faintly, casting a soft light. And there, in the center of the chamber, stood the sorcerer's first guardian, a towering figure of shadow and frost, its eyes glowing with cold fire. Elias stepped in front of Seraphine instinctively, dagger at the ready. The guardian moved, slow and deliberate but powerful, its steps shaking the floor. Seraphine's hands glowed faintly, a light forming around her fingertips. She whispered words Elias could not understand, and the air shimmered with energy. "This is it," she said. "We face the first trial, and we must face it together." Elias nodded, heart pounding, knowing that the journey was far from over. The castle had tested them already, and the true danger was only beginning. But he would not falter. Whatever awaited them, he would stand by Seraphine's side, through shadows, through frost, through magic, and through fear. The chamber was alive with magic. Frost spiraled in the air, catching the dim light from the runes on the walls, and the towering guardian moved with a terrifying grace. Elias tightened his grip on Seraphine's hand, feeling the warmth of her small hand against his own. It was the only certainty in a place that seemed to bend and twist with its own dark will. "Do not let go," Seraphine whispered, her eyes glowing faintly with the energy she summoned. "If we are separated, the castle will consume us." Elias swallowed hard and nodded. Every nerve in his body screamed in fear and determination. The guardian advanced, its eyes glowing like coals, its movements slow but deliberate. Each step it took caused the frozen floor to crack, sending shards of ice scattering across the chamber. "Elias, focus," Seraphine said softly. The Guardian feeds on fear. If you falter, it will overwhelm us. He drew a deep breath, trying to calm the storm in his chest. The fear of losing her, the fear of the shadows, the fear of the curse itself. All of it surged through him, yet he forced himself to focus on the present. Her hand in his, the glow of her magic, the determination in her eyes, they anchored him. The Guardian swung its massive arm, sending a wave of frost toward them. Elias reacted instinctively, pushing Seraphine out of the way. The ice shattered against the wall, and he felt the cold sting his skin through his cloak. Seraphine murmured a word of power, and a shield of light formed around them, blocking the next strike. The clash of magic and shadow echoed through the chamber, a thunderous sound that made the walls vibrate. "We need to move closer," Elias shouted over the noise. "Its strength, it will crush us if we stay here." Seraphine nodded, her hand glowing brighter. "Follow my lead, we must strike together, not apart." They advanced, step by careful step, coordinating their movements with instinct and trust. Elias parried the Guardian's attacks, diverting shards of ice, while Seraphine channeled her magic, striking at the creature with waves of energy. Each strike from her caused it to falter slightly, but the Guardian's form seemed endless, as if it could not truly be defeated. "You are amazing," Elias said, a mixture of awe and admiration in his voice. "I have never seen anyone—" "Focus," she snapped, her eyes flashing with determination. "Now is not the time for words." He nodded, swallowing his pride, and together they pushed forward. The Guardian roared, a sound like cracking ice, and advanced more aggressively. It swung again, and Elias barely dodged, feeling the force of the wind whip past him. Seraphine's light flared, illuminating the chamber in a brilliant burst, and the Guardian staggered. "We can do this," Elias shouted, his heart racing. "We are stronger together." The words seemed to fuel Seraphine, her energy flaring in response. She chanted softly, and the runes on the walls glowed brighter, amplifying her power. A wave of heat surged from her hands, and the Guardian shuddered under the combined force of their determination and courage. But then, a sudden illusion struck Elias, a vision of Seraphine being pulled into darkness, screaming, her form disappearing. His heart froze. He turned instinctively toward the vision, letting go of her hand for just a moment. "Elias," Seraphine's voice cut through the illusion. "Do not be fooled, it is not real." He blinked, shaking his head to clear the vision. The Guardian surged forward, sensing the distraction. Elias lunged to intercept it, pushing himself and Seraphine out of the way as shards of ice sprayed across the chamber. "We cannot let the castle divide us," Seraphine shouted. Her hands glowed fiercely, and Elias felt the heat against his skin. Together they formed a circle of light, combining their strength and will. The Guardian roared in fury, but for the first time it seemed vulnerable. Step by step, they moved in unison, attacking and defending, trusting each other completely. Elias realized that the Guardian's power was not just physical, it was fueled by fear and doubt. And as long as they trusted one another, as long as they refused to falter, they could withstand it. Hours passed, though it felt like minutes. The Guardian's movements became slower, more erratic, and Seraphine's magic grew brighter with each strike. Elias felt exhaustion creeping into his bones, but the sight of her determined expression and the warmth of her hand kept him moving. Finally, with a combined effort, they struck the Guardian with a final, blinding surge of light. The creature let out a sound like cracking ice and shattered into fragments of frost, leaving the chamber silent except for the echo of their breaths. They collapsed to the ground, hearts pounding, sweat and frost mingling on their faces. Elias looked at Seraphine, who was glowing faintly from the exertion of her magic. She smiled, faint but triumphant. "We did it," she said softly, her voice trembling with relief. "Yes," Elias replied, though his voice was hoarse. "Together." For a moment they sat in silence, the weight of what they had faced pressing down on them. Elias realized then how much he had come to care for her, not just as someone to protect, but as someone whose presence made the cold, dark world seem brighter. Seraphine looked at him, her eyes reflecting a mixture of gratitude and something deeper, something unspoken. "You stayed with me even when it was dangerous," she said quietly. I am grateful." Elias shook his head. "It was never about danger, it was about you, and I would do it again no matter what." Her cheeks flushed faintly, and she looked away, focusing on the chamber around them. "We must not linger," she said. "The castle is alive, and it has more trials ahead." Elias nodded, rising to his feet. They moved deeper into the castle, the corridors twisting and turning like a maze. Shadows flitted across the walls, whispering in voices that seemed familiar yet alien. Each step was a test of courage, each corner a challenge to their trust and resolve. As they reached the heart of the castle, they entered a vast hall filled with frozen mirrors. Their reflections stared back at them, but with subtle differences. Shadows in their eyes, fear etched into their expressions that they did not feel. Elias felt a shiver run down his spine. "These mirrors, they show not what is but what we fear," Seraphine said. "Do not believe them, they lie." Elias took a deep breath and stepped forward, keeping his focus on her. The reflections moved independently, mirroring their every step with subtle cruelty, showing them moments of failure and despair. Elias felt doubt creeping into his mind, fear threatening to break his resolve. "Remember," Seraphine said softly, "we are not alone. Trust in me, and I will trust in you." He nodded, gripping her hand tightly, and together they walked through the hall of mirrors, refusing to let the illusions sway them. The mirrors cracked and shattered as they passed, unable to withstand their combined will and trust. Finally, they reached the inner sanctum, a grand throne room frozen in time. Ice covered the floors and walls, and a massive throne sat at the far end, glowing faintly with dark energy. Elias felt a cold dread settle over him. This was the heart of the curse, the source of the sorcerer's power. Seraphine turned to him, her eyes serious. "This is it," she said. "The final trial, we must confront the source of the curse together." Elias nodded, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He had faced shadows, illusions, and a guardian of frost, but this felt different. The air itself seemed alive with magic, thick and suffocating, yet he felt her presence beside him, grounding him, giving him courage. They stepped forward, hands still clasped, into the glow of the throne. A voice echoed through the chamber, deep and cold, carrying the weight of centuries. "Who dares enter my domain?" the voice said. Seraphine's hands glowed with energy, and Elias felt the warmth of her power mingle with his own determination. Together, they advanced toward the throne, ready to face whatever awaited them. The shadows swirled around them, the frozen floor cracked beneath their feet, and the air shimmered with power. Elias realized then that the true trial was not just against the magic or the curse. It was against fear itself, and against the doubts that lingered in their hearts. "We are stronger together," Elias whispered. "Yes," Seraphine replied, her voice steady and unwavering, "and we will not falter." The throne room trembled as the final trial began. Shadows rose, illusions multiplied, and the magic of the curse surged around them. But Elias and Seraphine held fast, their hands intertwined, their courage unwavering. Whatever the castle threw at them, they would face it together.